We'll do a review on Likkutei Sichos in Chelik Lamed Gimel, volume 33, and this is the second Sicha for the Parshas Bamidbar. In this Sicha, the Rebbe discusses the idea of that Rashi brings down, and this is a Rashi Sicha as well, that it is good for a tzaddik and it's good for its neighbor. Woe to a Rasha and woe to the neighbor. From this week's Parsha, the way they were encamped over there, we learn this concept, and the Rebbe shows that there's differences between the Tanchuma and Medrash Rabbah and Rashi. The Rebbe explains and points out the differences, and the Rebbe will eventually explain that the impact from a neighbor on its neighbor, from a person on its neighbors, can really be in three ways. Either the neighbor just gets cut up as far as, say, a punishment that goes for one will extend to the neighbor, or we say that the neighbor actually impacts and causes the neighbor of his to become bad or good as they are, or there is really not the impact from the neighbor, it's the person themselves, but the fact that they live next to each other is just revealed. It's not really the impact, it reveals what they are. The Rebbe will explain these things in the source from we will learn this out from the level of mitzvos. We'll go step by step, and we'll do now the Bamidbar base. So, Aleph. So the Rebbe begins, Oidos smichas degel machnei Reuven, about the fact that the flag of the camp of Reuven, as you know, each of three tribes had their flag. So Reuven had one of these, was one of the groups, and Reuven had two more tribes with him. So that was the Degel Machane Reuven. It was a flag of the camp of Reuven, the whole camp. So where was their encampment? So it says Shechonu Teimona. So they were to the south. Livnei Kahos. So there inside, the Levites surrounded the Mishkan, and the Bnei Kahos were situated on the south, and the Degel, the camp of the Jews, surrounded a further outer circle, and on the south there was the flag of the camp of Reuven. That was the flag over there. Shechonu al yerech hamishkan teimono. They rested on the side of the Mishkan to the south. So the Bnei Kahos were to the south of the Mishkan, and the Machne Reuven, they were on the south, on the outer south of the Bnei Kahos. And Amru Chazal, so our sages said about these camps, they were next to the Bnei Kahos. So our sages of blessed memory say, it's also brought down in Rashi's commentary on the Torah. Woe to the Rasha and one to the neighbor. We all know that Korach was from the Bnei Kahos. He made a machlokes against Moshe and Aaron, started that whole conflict, and next to Korach from the Bnei Kahos, Levi, the Bnei Kahos, and along with him came from the Bnei Reuven. The Reuven, the Degel Machne Reuven, was also of the south. So our sages therefore say, and Rashi brings it down, woe to a Rasha, which is Korach, And woe to the neighbors, which would include the people of the Degel Machne Reuven. In the pasuk, we see that the people Anoshim from Reuven, Elitzer ben Shdeir, and the camp over there of the um, of the Levim that joined the Machloikis, the 250 people were all from the Bnei Ruvain and Ein ben Pelas and Dasan Vaviram, and they were all the sons of Ruvain. So basically, woe to the evil, which is Koirach, and woe to the neighbor, which is from the tribe of Ruvain. What exactly does it mean that woe to the evil and woe to the neighbor? What does it mean? So the Rebbe brings down that there is three interpretations. Bipirush al maimer zeh, the meaning of this statement, Oil Rasha Chulu, Benegel in Yonenu, as it manifests itself by us between the Koirach and the Levi and this, what does it mean, Oil Rasha Oil Shchenu? Matzinu kamo ifanim. We find various ways. Umehem, and the Rebbe is going to bring down three: the Tanchuma and the Bamidbar Rabba and the Medrash Rabba and Pirush Rashi. So in the Tanchuma over there, it says that the neighbors were punished, which means the neighbors of Koirach were punished together with the Koirach. Later on, we see that the Teitze Eish, and they were swallowed by the earth. That was also, that affected the neighbors Ruven. So in Tanchuma, let's look inside the Lashon. Tanchuma Isa, Umin Hadorim, and from the south, from the Levites, surrounding the Mishkan, is Bnei Koirach, was the sons of Koirach. Usmuchim Lohem, who is next to them outside in the further parameter, with the camp of the other tribes, Esmuchim Lem Reuven v'Shimon v'Gad, the three tribes, Reuven and Shimon and Gad. Says the Tanchuma, Mikan Omru. So from here, our rabbis say, Oil Rasha v'Oil Shchena, woe to the evil and woe to the neighbor. Reuven, Shimon, and Gad were neighbors of the Bnei Kahas. Koirach was from the Bnei Kahas. So we're saying, Oil Rasha v'Oil Shchena, woe to the Rasha and v'Shchena. Elu shloishos hashvotim shoyu shchenim lekoirach v'adosoi. These three tribes that were neighbors to Koirach and his community, Bedoram on the south, Avdu imoy b'machle kusoi. They were lost. They were destroyed together with Koirach in his rivalry, in his argument. They were lost as well. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Vatiftach ha'oretz es piha." The earth opens its mouth. Vativla oisom ve'ez boteyem. It swallowed them and their homes. Ve'eskol asher lohem, everything that they owned. Ve'eskol ha'odom asher lekoirach, and all the people that were to Koirach. Ve'eskol rechush, and also all the fortune. So we see that the punishment also stretched to all the others. As kol asher lahem, as kol ha'odom asher lekoirach, all of the ones. What do we see here? That those who went along were punished as well. So there's a few things in this Tanchuma, as the Rebbe will point out. First of all, he talks about specifically all three tribes. Like I mentioned earlier, it was the Degel Machne Reuven, but Shimon and Gad were the two tribes that went together with the Machne Reuven. In the pasuk, we actually don't find specifically that the people of Shimon and Gad participate. We find the Bnei Reuven. Well, we don't find Shimon and God participating, but the Tanchuma learns Oil Rasha, Oil Shchena. We'll see the topic of discussion. The Rebbe discusses this, that they all were part of the punishment. Woe to the Rasha, woe to the neighbor, and the Tanchuma learns that the punishment of Atiftach Ha'oretz, and it swallowed all of them, meaning all the people that were neighbors together with Korach, and that would include all of the camp of Machne Reuven, Degel Machne Reuven, which is also, besides Reuven, also Shimon and Gad. This is the Tanchuma. Now, Bamidbar Rabba, in Bamidbar Rabba, over there it says different language. Over there it says Gimel Shel Dorim, the three tribes that were on the south. Again, this is Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. Shahoyu lebale machloikis smuchim. They were also part. They were the bale machloikis close by. Avdu imohem. They were also destroyed together with the Bnei Kos, together with Korach. V'aleim nemar oil rosh oil shchena. By them it says oil rosh oil shchena. Who are these? Umi hoyo bale machloikis. Who are the actually masters of the machloikis? That was Korach ben Yitzhar, ben Kos, and then it was son of Levi. So Korach was Yitzhar son of Kos. He was from the Bnei Kos. And that means that the Bnei Kos were on the south. Ulefi shoyu smuchim lahem. Reuven v'Shimon v'Gad, and since Reuven and Shimon and Gad were next to them, hoyu kulam bale machloikis. All of them, Reuven, Shimon, and Gad, are all part master machloikis. Shekeinu oimer, because the pasuk says, "Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar v'Gomer." He is the one that took himself and started the machloikis. Doesn't say about them, but they became Baal the machloikis. V'chein b'nei Gad u'b'nei Shimon. So in the pasuk it says v'Gomer, the children of Reuven. He adds, even though it doesn't say about Reuven, about Gad and Shimon, but v'chein b'nei Gad b'nei Shimon. Avhem hoyu b'alei meriva. Those who the sons of Gad, sons of Shimon, they were also the arguments. Over there, the pasuk just talks about the descendants of Korach, who was camped on the south. He was next to the Gomer is Bnei Reuven, but the Bamidbar adds the same thing as Bnei Gad, Bnei Shimon. They also turned into Baal Meriva with them. That's the language of Bamidbar. So you noticed over here in the Tanchuma, which is Rebbe will bring out, but I'm bringing it out now so it should be clear. In the Tanchuma, it says that they were destroyed together with them. It doesn't say that they became Bala Machloikis with them. In the Medrash Rabbah, in the Bamidbar Rabbah, it says that they actually became Bala Meriva, the Bala Shimon and the Shimon and God together with the Bnei Reuven. But when we look at Rashi ala Torah, but what's the Rashi's ala Torah? Ala posik mishpachois bnei kohos yachnu goymer teimona. The posik says there that the families of the bnei kohos, they would camp around the Mishkan to the south. Kosav, Rashi writes, usmuchin lohem, who was next to them, degel Reuven, the flag of Reuven. Hachonim Temona, who were also camped on the south. As the Rebbe will point out, in Rashi, it does not say Usmuchim Lahem Degel Machane Reuven. The Degel and the camp of Reuven, which would include Shimon and God as well. Rashi brings down Smuchim Lahem Degel Reuven Hachonim Temona, the flag of Reuven. That's the unique, the flag that represents just the fact that Reuven was there. And Rashi brings down oile Rasha v'oile Shchene. Woe to Rasha, woe to the neighbor. Lekach loku mehem. So therefore, from the tribes of Reuven, together with the Bnei Kohos, together with Korach, Doson va'Aviram, who are all Reuvens, Umasayim v'chamishim ish, and the 250 people, they were punished, smitten im Korach va'Dosai, together with Korach and his community, because shenimshechu imam b'machlekosam, they draw with them in their quarrel against Moshe Rabbeinu. So here, it was that they were part of the machlokes. So the Rebbe is going to articulate now very detailed between the way it's written in Tanchuma, the way it's written in Medrash Rabbah, and the way it's written in Rashi. Is going to show you that there is differences, and everything is very precise. And the Rebbe is going to explain why these differences. So the Rebbe starts off by first starting out. We learned the way it's written in Medrash Tanchuma, the way it's written in the Medrash Rabbah, and the way it's written in Rashi. So what's the differences? The Rebbe is going to point out. B'Tanchuma nema rak shenenshu yachad. Tanchuma doesn't talk about that they were quarreling, that they were part of the machlokes. Tanchuma talks just about the fact that they were going to punish together. When the earth opened up for all of Korach, they were swallowed in as well. They were destroyed. They got lost. They were also lost in the machlokes of Korach. And that's why Rashi brings the pasuk which talks about the loss that they were destroyed. Rashi brings the proof from the pasuk. The earth opened its mouth, swallowed them, the Korach community, their homes, everything they owned, and all the people that were to Korach, and all the fortune. This pasuk isn't talking about that they participated in any machlokes. It just talks about they were punished together. This is only talking about the punishment. So when we say, as the Rebbe will explain later on, woe to the Rasha and woe to the neighbor, that the neighbor gets caught up in the punishment of the Rasha. They got caught up being neighbors over there. That's the way it's written in the Tanchuma. But the Pirush Rashi, Moisif, in Rashi, it adds, it says, V'loku mehem, that they were smitten. That's, Tanchuma says smitten, it says, but Rashi adds, Rashi says, Shenimshechu imohem b'machleikusam. They were drawn in them in the machlokes. So Rashi clearly also says that the shechene, the Rasha, is not just the consequence that the punishment reaches the neighbor, but the neighbor actually gets to do bad and get involved in what the bad neighbor is doing. That they got drawn in with them in their quarrel. Hainu, that means to say, Shaharasha Moshach as Shchenoi, that the evil draw the neighbor, Gam Lemaisa HaAveda, also to the act of the Aveda. The first Tanchuma over there, it says they were punished as neighbors. Here it says that they actually, in Rashi, that they were actually drawn into the machlokes. That the Rasha drew the Shechene, Gam Lemaisa HaAveda. And that's why Rashi is quoting Tanchuma. He doesn't bring down the point that they were swallowed, because that's the punishment. Rashi brings down, that's why Rashi leaves out the proof of the Tanchuma from the pasuk Vatiftach Oretz es Piyah, because that pasuk is talking about punishment. There would be no evidence that the neighbors got involved and they became bad as well. But uh, according to Rashi, they were involved, like we said, we'll see soon. But the quarreling Dosan Aviram, they were all part of the Machlokes. That's part of what the meaning Oil Rosha Oil Shchenoi. Either it means woe to the Rasha, the Shchen can get punished, or according to Rashi, we added now, woe to the Shochen that gets drawn into the same bad activity of the Russian neighbor. The Bamidbar adds even more. Not that they were drawn in somehow or influenced by Koirach and his community. They were all machloikis. They too were men of quarrel. All these, the three distinctions is going to be, the Rebbe is going to explain later on what's the difference between these different levels. The Rebbe says there's different ways a bad neighbor can impact the neighbor. Either just the punishment will go to him, or he can make him bad, or it's not even the neighbor impacting them. It's they're bad themselves, but they sort of bring it to the surface. If they're bad and they're next to a bad neighbor, that neighbor didn't draw them in, but he just revealed and he got them to do what they're on their own, technically. And these are all three different interpretation of the word woe to the Rasha, woe to the neighbor. What does it mean? This is what the Rebbe is saying, that the words oil Rasha, oil shchenoi has this connotation in three interpretation. Either the shachan gets punished, either the shachan, the neighbor, gets involved, or the shachan's evil gets revealed. He's bad on his own, as the Rebbe will explain. Now, first, the Rebbe points out that in this Rashi, several points, the Rebbe points out that the Rashi means specifically the tribe of Reuven. And according to Rashi, it does not include Shimon and Gad. And why not? As the Rebbe will explain later on, because we don't find Shimon and Gad did anything in the Pshuta Shel Mikra. But the question is, why? Why only Reuven? Let's look inside. Base. We'll do Ois base. Gam yesh lohavin kama diyukim v'shinuyim b'loshen Rashi. To understand several diyukim and changes in Rashi's language, in this Rashi itself. Number one, Aleph. When Rashi writes Usmuchim Lahem Degel Reuven, the flag of Reuven, Hachonim Teimono, who were camped to the south. Rashi does not detail that in this flag includes also the tribes of Shimon and Gad. As in Tanchum Midbar, they clearly detail, specify Shimon and Gad as part of it. Why? Why only Reuven? And the Rebbe says it's not only that it didn't detail it, but maybe it's included in the Degel Reuven. The Rebbe says it doesn't say Degel Machane Reuven, the flag of the camp. It just says Degel Reuven. Let's look in the bracket. It seems Mashadik Rashi that Rashi was very precise in his language, and he says Degel Reuven. Veloy, and it doesn't say Degel Machane Reuven, the Degel of the camp Reuven. which is Kilshoin HaKosu. That's the language of the verse. It says Degel Machne Ruven. Rashi himself, in the following commentary, Hamuva B'Samach, which is brought down soon, the Rebbe is going to discuss that as well. Over there, when he talks about the flag, he says Degel Machane Yehuda, the flag of the camp of Yehuda, because over there we include everybody. Over here, he just says Degel Reuven. That is kikavanose. Why does Rashi say just Degel Reuven? Kikavanose rak l'shevet Reuven l'chud. Because Rashi's intention is just for the shevet of Reuven. V'loy l'shvotim shehoyu choynim olav, and not to the tribes that camped with him. So, besides that Rashi doesn't detail it, but Rashi's language of Degel Reuven, not Degel Machne Reuven, implies clearly that he doesn't want to include also Shimon and Gad, only Reuven. And why not if they're neighbors? Because we're going to see when we talk about the positive, that impacts, Rashi says, all the three who were next to the positive get to, and here only one is affected, only Reuven. Vatmir Gudoyla Yoser, this surprise gets bigger. The surprise, why only Reuven? When we learn the continuation of this topic, Ala Posuk Moshe v'Aaron uBono, when it talks about Moshe, Aaron, and his sons, Pirush Rashi explains, Usmuchim lohem degel machna Yehuda, who was close to the Moshe and Aaron, was the flag of the camp of Yehuda. It says Machna Yehuda, and it says V'achronim, all of those who camped together with the Machna Yehuda were the tribe of Yisachar, Uzvula. And Rashi says, Toiv la tzaddik, toiv l'shchene. Good for the tzaddik and just good for the neighbor. The goodness of Moshe and Aaron being next to these tribes impacted them. Toiv l'tzaddik, toiv l'shchene. Good for a tzaddik, for Moshe and Aaron, and good for the neighbors, the camp of Yehuda. Who's the camp? All of the people in Yehuda. Shehoyu shchenav shel Moshe, because they were neighbors of Moshe who would occupy himself in Torah. Nasu gedolim b'Torah. They became great in Torah. So we see very clearly, Rashi's sources in Tanchuma and the Midbar over there, the same two discussions, the same sources we're discussing over here. And Rashi over there brings down from the Medrash Rabbah, from the Tanchuma, and it brings it down fully that includes everybody in the camp of Yehuda, Yisachar and Zvulun. Our source is also the Tanchum Medrash Rabbah. In the Tanchum and Medrash Rabbah, he specifies Shimon and Gad in addition to Reuven. And Rashi leaves him out and says only Shimon and Gad. Why? Hare Shekan. The source is the same, the Tanchum Medrash Rabbah. And the Bamidbar and Bamidbar, they're consistent, both by Toiv l'Rosh, Oil l'Rosh, Oil l'Shcheinoi, and Toiv l'Tzadik, Toiv l'Shcheinoi. They're consistent. But over here, but according to Rashi, Gabe Toiv l'Tzadik, when it comes to it's good for the Tzadik. Hebi Rashi Gamas Yisachar Uzvulun. Rashi brings and says Yisachar Uzvulun, their part for whom it's good. Umat Tam Shino Rashi Gabe Oil l'Rosh. So what's the reason Rashi changes it by Oil Rosh and not to include also Shimon and Gad? Because of Rak Degel Reuven. He says just the flag of Reuven, not Degel Machane Reuven, everybody. Like he says by Toiv La Tzadik, that it's the Degel Machane Yehuda. The Suloi, only the flag of Reuven and not anything else, no more. So the Rebbe says, so the reason is because we don't see them getting involved in this rishus over there. The question is, how come? So the Rebbe says, yesh loimar would seem that we could say the reason why there's only no mention of Shimon and God, because we don't find in the literal interpretation of the verse, Shagod v'Shimon nimshchu imoy b'machloikis, that God and Shimon were drawn with them in machloikis. We need to understand the reason for this distinction. That over here, God and Shimon were not drawn in. And by the tzaddik, everybody was part of it. What's the difference of the ideas? This medrash says the punishment. This medrash, according to the Tanchuma, only the punishment. According to the medrash Rebbe, it was also drawn into the machlokes. And according to Rashi, it's they were Baal Meriva themselves. Rashi, the Rak Shevet Ruven Nimshach b'machlokes. No, that's I added that. The Rebbe over here is asking, what's this difference over there, and why do the Medrashim say it differently than Rashi? Rashi says that Rak Shevet Ruven Nimshach b'machlokos. There was only Shevet Ruven that was part of the machlokes. And it didn't affect the other ones. Or we should say that neighboring of Koirach, Polo Gamal Shevet Shimon v'Shevet God, that it impacted them as well. So according to Rashi, it was only Reuben impacted. According to the Tanchum Medrash Rebbe, Shimon and God were impacted as well. Why? What's the difference of the ideas? And in Rashi itself, the first question Rebbe asked Rashi itself, why is it Take that that Reuven was affected and not Shimon and God? What's the pshat over here? What's the difference? Number two, the Rebbe asks, "Beis b'tanchumo u'b'Bamidbar Rabbo tanchum Rabbi loy pirshu mi heim mishevet Reuven shenevdu im koirach." They don't articulate who of the tribe of Reuven that were lost with koirach v'adose. It just said they were included, but doesn't say who of the tribe of Reuven. Rashi mefaret, Rashi details Dosom va'aviram u'mosayim v'chamishim ish sherubim heim m'shevet Reuven. That Dos and Aviram, the 250 men, most of them were from the tribe of Reuven. Why does Rashi bring this down? As the Rebbe will explain, that according to Rashi, they were the Bala Machlokes to begin with, and they weren't just drawn in. Dosam Avinu, we know these were Bala Machlokes, and Rashi wants to say it didn't have to impact the neighboring. Doesn't impact make them evil. That neighbor just makes them reveals who they are, and these 250 we know who they are, and that's what Rashi special, as we'll see in a minute. Okay, so now we have the differences. According to Rashi, the only ones that were affected by Koirach was Reuven, and not Shimon and God. But according to the Tanchuma and the Medrash Rebbe, all three tribes were affected. Question is, why, and what's the difference of ideas? Why does the Rashi say only Reuven and not the other ones? And number two, Rashi seems to detail specifically who of the tribe of Reuven was affected, that it was Dosma Aviram, the 250 people. Why are they not detailed in the Medrash? So this tells us the clue of the Rebbe's pshat, as we'll see in Nois Gimel. So The Rebbe in Ois Gimel begins by defining the impact of a neighbor on his neighbor, on their neighbor. A neighbor can, number one, bring about punishment to their neighbor, even if they're not guilty of it, as we'll see. A neighbor can cause the other neighbor to become bad, learn from him. And a neighbor can sometimes just reveal the evil that you're bad at yourself just in the wrong neighborhood. Let's see inside. Gimel. Yes, we can explain this by introducing Shabi'inyan Pulas Hashchenus, in the matter that the impact of neighbor, Hashpoas Odom al Shchene, that a person influences neighbor, Motzinu Kama. We find various ways. Aleph, number one, Ulas Hashochen hi be'inyan chitzoni legamri. The impact of the neighbor is just something external. He doesn't infect you inside. There's a superficial outer aspect that it impacts. Kigoyin. As for example, in the other way around, Shahaskar, we're talking about not bad or good here, we're just talking the impact of a neighborhood, of a neighbor on the neighbor. Is, say, for example, the schar of a tzaddik nimshach gam l'shchenei. The reward for a tzaddik, the neighbor gets some of that reward, or the opposite, the punishment of a one gets to the other one. The punishment that is on the evil extends also to the neighbor. And the Rebbe gives an example from the Gemara. The Gemara talks about, in the end of Sukkah, that there was one of the daughters of the Kohanim who was very disrespectful, and she banged on the Mizbeach, and she was very insulting, derogatory to the Mizbeach, and the Chachamim punished, but they didn't just punish her. They punished that whole mishmar, that whole term that they would do. So you see, if somebody gets punished, the whole mishmar gets punished. Kapashtus Loshna Gemara, this would be the simple meaning of the Gemara, this taich oile rosh oile shchene, the Soip Masechta Sukkah, in the end of Tractate Sukkah. Over there, the Gemara says, the konsul kol hamishmar kuloi, that they punished the entire mishmar, that guard that had to turn all those kohanim and that mishmar, biglal Miriam bas Bilga shehimira dasa, because of Miriam, the daughter of Bilga. He converted, and from her religion, she left her religion. And because of her, Chaloina Stuma, as the Gemara says with it. Afal Pi, one can add l'chayra, Vichi Biglola Kansina L'Kula Mishmara. The Gemara asked there, because one person did convert it to another religion, so should we punish the entire guard, the entire group over there? Elot, what does the Gemara answer? Oile Rasha, Oile Shchene. So this, what it means? Woe to the Rasha, woe to the neighbor. If you're neighbor of the Rasha, you get cut up inevitably. That's the Pashta meaning in the Gemara and Sukkah over there, that the rest of the Mishmar was punished because of one of them. That means it's not that they've learned that, not that they're bad. It's not that there's something inner that they did wrong from being neighbors, but it's just that it extended, their punishment extended to that. That's number one. Number two, Rebbe says, is the pu'ulas hashogani pu'ula pnimi. Sometimes the neighbor impacts you in an inner way. What does it mean in an inner way? Kloimar, to say, He impacts the conduct of the neighbor. He has a bad influence that the neighbor starts behaving bad because of the neighbor. To the extent that he also changes who he is. He makes him into a bad person. That's an inner change that the shochan impacts the neighbor. And number three, shchenes eina hasiba. The neighbor, being neighbors, is not the cause for the neighbor's behavior. Shetov latzadik tov l'shchene, that because the tzaddik is good, the neighbor, it's not the tzaddik impacts the neighborhood, and the other way, woe to the evil, woe to the neighbor, that the evil impacts and changes. He's the cause for the bad of the neighbor, or he's the cause for the good. No. The neighbor means Elu Siman al Mehusoy Shalashochan. This only provides as a sign who the neighbor is. If you want to know who the neighbor is, look who his neighbor. If he's in that neighborhood, that means it's not that the neighbor did, it's not the person made him bad or impact him in any way. He's just in that neighborhood. That means that he fits in there, that he wants to be part of that. The fact that they're neighbors, this points to that they're both connected to each other in their essence and who they are, or similar to this. They have a connection because that's why they're neighbors. It's not that one causes the other one. The act of being neighbors, this reveals, and this brings out this characteristic of the neighbor. It brings it out from the hidden and potential, and revealed in actuality. So the person is a negative person to begin with. But when you move in the neighborhood, you actually begin to act on that. So these are the three different impacts of a neighbor. Either it's just what happens to the neighbor can happen to the other one as a punishment or as a reward. Either he influences him for the good or for the bad, or it just reveals the person is bad and that's why he's in the neighborhood. But maybe if he wasn't a neighbor, he wouldn't act out on it. But just in the neighborhood, he's evil on his own and he has the bad. Just being next to the Rasha, that things comes out in the poem. And now the Rebbe is going to say that this is actually the three aspects of the three interpretation. The difference between Tanchuma, Medrash Rabbah, and Rashi. And the Rebbe continues now to explain in Ois Dalet. In Ois Dalet, the Rebbe will explain the source from where we learn out from the pasuk Oy L'Rasha Oy L'Shchene. In Halacha, over there it talks about when a person has a plague on his home, and if that wall is shared by two partners, even if the plague is on one side, the other party has to be part of rebuilding it and fixing it and participating, which tells you, well, if you're a neighbor who has a plague, the shochan, the neighbor, is as well involved in it. And there are three different ways to explain it. And this brings us to these three different effects of a Rasha to his neighbor, or a tzaddik to the neighbor, the way it comes out from the halachas as we learn it in das pasuk. So let's look inside. Dalet. V'yashloimar hamoker l'shloisha oifanim elu. We can say that the source for these three ways is b'mokor inyan. That's in the source of the subject, the oil rasha, oil shchenoi. When the source of the subject, oil rasha, oil shchenoi, b'halocha, in halacha b'dinei nigei botim, in the laws in which there is a plague on the home, there is a nega, a tsaras on the home, and you need to remove and rebuild. So this is the language by the Torah's Kahanim. It says, the Pasuk says, Vichiltzu, and they shall take apart, plural, the house or the wall, which is has the plague, Malamid. This teaches us Sheshneim Chelzim, that two of them, both of them have to remove. Mikan Omru, says the Torah's Kahanim, so from here they say, Oil Rasha, Oil Shchene. Woe to the Rasha, woe to the neighbor. He has the plague, and the other guy has to help him to take it apart. As the Torah's Kahanim continue, Shneim Chelzim, they both of them must take it apart. Shneim Koitzim, they both must knock it down. Shneim Mevim Esavonim. It says Yaktzia from the Lashon of the Posik. And Shneim Mevim Esavonim, they both have to bring the stones, meaning they're equal partners to fix this, even though it was on one side. Similarly, it's also in the Mishnah, in the Tractate of Negoim, similar like in the Torah's Kahanim. So, begidrei shel din zeh yeshno gimel pirushim. How to explain, define this halacha where both partners, both people have to participate? There are three interpretations. Aleph, number one opinion, one interpretation, what we're talking about here. Im koisel mafsig ben shnei botim. If there is a wall that interrupts between two homes, they shear a wall, the two homes. And it appears a nega, this plague, on the wall to this one's house. So he's the one that has the nega. Balabayis achar, the other owner for the other house, tzorichli topil imoy, needs to be part and be together with him. He has to go along with the one who has the neg on his side. Diksi, because the pasuk says, "V'chiltzu es ha'avonim loshon rabim chulu," that they will together take apart these stones. This is the way the Bartanura, the Bavadjim Bartanura translates it. Shelefi pirush zeh, according to the Bartanura's interpretation, Leichal chiyuv zeh ala chefzo hakoisol shel hashachar. The obligation did not rest on the object of the neighbor. In other words, it's not that the neighbor's wall has become plagued also, because no. Elo zeudin b'tipul agavra. This is a halacha, what the person must take care of. The shchene shel harasha tzarich lihitapel imay, that the neighbor of the Russia needs to be secondary together with the one that has, or to go along with him to help him out. It's not because your wall is plagued as well. That's not what the Bartanura said. Bartanura says you have to help out your neighbor, not because your wall is, not because it's your wall, is because you have to help out. It's an obligation on the person. B'chalitzas ha'avonim, you have to help him remove the stones. So and the removal of the the wall of ahavas havonim shel Rasha, and to bring the stones of the Rasha. The Rasha is the one that has the plague. The Torah obligates the neighbor to help and to participate in the removal and the rebuilding of that wall. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that Hodish Neim Cholzim Beis, the reason that they both have to remove, I knew. That means Shachiyuv the Chalitzos Ha'even, the obligation to remove the stone, Chal Gam Al Chelik Ha'even Shel HaShochem. It also applies to the portion of the stone that belongs to the neighbor. Shaloi Nira Boyanaga. This he didn't see in that part of the stone of the neighbor which you didn't see. That has to be removed too. The reason he has to remove it is because his stone, even though he doesn't see it, has a nega. Within this, we have two pirushim. Aleph, we have Shitas Rashi b'soich Mesechta Sukkah. Rashi's interpretation, the end of Mesechta Sukkah, in which it says there, Oil Rasha, Oil Shchena, we quoted before, Miriam Bas Bilga. Over there in the end of Sukkah, he says, Shahadin, that this halochet, Shebeteres Koinim, the Shneim Cholzim, they both have to remove, Mipnei Oil Rasha, Oil Shchena. Rashi says, Hurak be'even shebimikitsoya. It's in a cornerstone. There, the neighbor needs to, a cornerstone that you share with the neighbor, that you have to help the neighbor. As Rashi explained elsewhere, with Pirush Difra Mishnah, the Masechta Negoyim, as Rashi explains the Mishnah, Masechta Negoyim, Even Shebezovis, a stone which is on a cornerstone, when you remove, you have to remove its entirety, even though it's only visible on one side, but a cornerstone goes to both sides. You only see it on one side. Even hamnugas shebezovis, if you have a plagued stone, which is in a corner, shenira bebayizeh, you see it in this house, ubebayizeh, in the other house, shekain derech hazovius losis shom avonus gedolos, because this is the nature, the way, when you do a corner, you put there a large stone, hamachzikim es koloi ve'akoisel, they hold the entire thickness of the wall, v'nira mishnei tzdodim, and you can see it from both sides. She'even zu yesh oleo chiyuv lachloitz es kulo. Then this stone, there is an obligation to remove all of it. Gam hatzad shelenira ba'anega, also the side where the nega was not visible. So according to Rashi, what we're talking about, a large cornerstone, that one stone is in both sides because it's a big stone. You don't see it. The cornerstone is visible in both sides because it's the stone is visible on both sides. The nega is visible on one side, but the stone itself is visible on two sides. Then you have to remove the entire stone, and that means that there is there's a nega over there on that one stone. It's not just that Gavra, the person, has to help, but the other way to learn this is Rashi. Yesh mefarshim, it reads another interpretation. And this is from the Sefer Mishnah Achrona. He says, Shadin the Cholitz es kuloi, that this that we're saying that you have to remove all of it, huloi rak be'even shebezovis habayis. We're not talking about a stone which is on the corner shenidis mishnei tzedakah, because it's a corner, you see it on both sides of the house. Ela b'chol chelki hakoisel, but rather in all parts of the wall, shekeneged hanega b'tzad hasheni, all parts of the wall, if it's behind the nega on the other side, anything behind it, hamafsik ben shnei abotim, which interrupts between the two houses, you have to remove it all. Bezu kavonas Mishnah, and this is what the Mishnah means: the koisel mafsik bein shnei botim, v'nira nega bekoisel l'tzad bayizeh. That you have a wall which interrupts in between two houses, and the plague is on the wall in this house. Shneim chelsim, they both have to remove mishum oil rosh oil shchenoi, because oil rosh and oil shchenoi shegam chaveiroi chayiz lach leitzavonim shebechelik shaloi. His friend needs to remove the part of the stone in his side, neged hanega, which is opposite of the plague. So the plague is on this side, but your friend on the other side has to remove it. Not only in the cornerstone, which covers two sides, it's visible on both sides. This is only visible on one side. And yet it impacts the other side. The other person has to remove it. So again, what are these three things we're discussing over here? One of them, that the wall doesn't become impacted at all. It's just that you have to help the other guy. You don't have the plague on your side. It's on the other side. But the person is obligated, but it didn't really impact your side of the wall. The other, number two, is that it actually impacts the stone, but there's two ways. When does it impact the actual wall? According to Rashi, the Rebbe brings down, it's only by that kind of stone which serves, that it's seen, the same stone is seen on both sides, so then you have to remove it. And the other one says no, even if it's not the same stone. So I'm thinking again, look at the halacha. Let's say you have two rows of stones in between. So the stone on the other side, even though it's its own row, I'm not sure about that, but even if it's own row, you would still have to remove it. But in any event, the point here is how much of the actual wall gets impacted because the other neighbor has the plague. And now the Rebbe is going to explain it. Shegimul dinim b'shitos elu, that these three halachas, these they fit the three ways the pulos hashchenes. What is the impact of neighbors? Oile rosh, oile shchene, woe to the evil, woe to the neighbor. Loif and ha'alef, according to the first way, pu'ulas hashochan pu'ula chitzonis bilvad. The impact of the neighbor is just an external one. We said before, some doesn't affect it. It doesn't impact on the wall, the home of the neighbor. It only obligates the neighbor that he needs to go along with you in removing the stones, but nothing happened to him. There's no impact. There's no influence. According to the second way, woe to the neighbor. And we're saying, there's a more inner, a stronger impact. You're changing them. You have to remove the entire stone, which is the corner of the house. Also, the part that is in the neighbor's side, even though there's no visible neg over there, Dahainu shezeu ki'ilu gama even shel hashochan him benugaz. That says if also the stone of the neighbor has a plague, and therefore, because since you share the same stone, your plague becomes his plague. But according to the third way, the reason the neighbor needs to Russia to move his stones, because you being a neighbor of the Russia points to the fact that you have a connection to the Russia, that you're not much better. Not because the Russia impacted you. But that's actually a sign that in essence they have a connection. They're connected to each other. In this wall, and there's a nega appears on the other side by your friend. How does it moide this point? Also, the part of the wall which is opposite, which belongs to the friend, is also also has a connection to the nega. Even though it's not visible, it's not the same stone. I mean, like I said before, it's actually a different stone. So the other side of the nega, it still shows. It's not that. So these three ways fit exactly with the three impacts, according to the first way that he actually impacts it. It's only externally. Then you didn't impact your friend's wall. It's just he has to help you out. According to the second way, you impact him because that cornerstone which you share is like one stone. You influence him that this nega is a nega for the other person as well. It's like the inner impact. And finally, the third way, it's not your impact at all. It just reveals that the person is a rasha like you, and he needs to remove because it's his own problem. Since you got a nega, means that he has a nega too. And now we'll do oisei. Ulifizeh, says the Rebbe, yesh levair. According to this, we can explain oisei. So now that we figured out, Rebbe figured out the three different possibilities and also how they are sourced in the halacha and the basis in the Teres Kohanim and the Mishnah in the Goyim, the three possibilities. So the Rebbe explains the differences now between the Tanchuma and Rashi and the Medrash Rabbah, how the Shchenes affects the neighbor. Hey, according to this, we can also explain Gam tam achiluk ben shloisha droshes hanal beparshasenu. Also, the reasons for the difference between the three expounding that we're talking in our parsha. Hatanchuma, Bamidbar Rabba, or Pirush Rashi. In the Pirush Inyan, how they explain the idea oil rosha, the oil rosha, oil shchene. The Inyan hasmichas the dergel machne ruven levnei kos, in this idea, this concept of this closeness of machne ruven to bnei kos, how much did the bnei kos koirach, what kind of an impact did they have on the camp, the dergel machne ruven? Hatanchuma svirlei koifun halef. The Tanchuma holds like the first way. Shepaulas hashchenes kan, that what is the impact of this neighbor over here? What did this neighbor, that they are neighbors of Koirach, what did it do? It's mainly for the punishment. The punishment that comes on the Rosh, it extends also on the Shechina. We don't mean to say that it can have no impact, but mainly, what is the association of the neighbor to the Rasha, that the Rasha's punishment can also get to the neighbor? And even in Avafilu Kishapoil Sheshchena Yishtate b'Maisav, even if he impacts that the neighbor is going to participate in his bad actions, it's not considered that the neighbor is doing it. It's only that the neighbor is dragged after you. But that did not create a change in the essence of the neighbor. The neighbor has become now a Rasha. No, that's not the Rasha. The Shechina doesn't become a Rasha, really. Even if he does some things bad, it's mainly against the punishment, but it doesn't really change. That's why he only brings the part that they got lost with Koirach in the Machloikis, not so much, doesn't discuss that they were impacted, influenced by Koirach. Lepirush Rashi, but according to Rashi's interpretation, Pu'ulas Hashchenas Eine Rak B'Negeya La'inish. The impact of neighbor is not only as it pertains to punishment, Elahigam Pu'ula V'Shinui Beguf HaShochem. It also the act, Rosh L'Shcheinoi, what the neighbor does to the neighbor, it's an impact and it changes the Shochem himself. The Shochem changes the body, the change who the Shochem is. That's what Rashi adds. Shaloi Rak Loku Mehem. Rashi also says they were smitten. They were drawn in with them, the machlokes. That neighbor brings them, that they become part, and they're drawn into their machlokes. And the Rebbe cautions here another point over here. So basically, according to the Tanchuma, the impact was just superficial, but they got punished with them. And even if they were dragged in, it was just not a change in their essence of the neighbors. That's according to the Tanchuma. According to Rashi, they were dragged in it. But the Rebbe wants to caution that these are not two things that it says that they were smitten, meaning punished, and on top of that, they were drawn into that. The Rebbe explains now the wording in Rashi over here. Side point. V'yashloimer, the Rebbe says in the brackets, she'ein kavonas Rashi b'mashe kosuv lekach loku mehem dosun v'aviron. Therefore, of the neighbors, mehem, of the neighbors of Koirach, were smitten. Dosun v'aviron, the 250 people, in Koirach v'adosu, with Koirach in his community. And Rashi says because they were drawn, shenimshechu imam b'machlekusam, that they were drawn in them with the machlekes. So this doesn't mean that there's two parts here. Rashi is saying two things. First of all, they were punished as neighbors. And second, that they were also impacted. The Rebbe says no. If that first, then first Rashi should say that they were drawn in and then they were punished. So Shem Shnei Inyanim, Rashi is not trying to say these are two separate things. Aleph, Shenentri Mohim, Loku. First of all, they were punished with them, like in the Medrash Rabbah. Rashi says Loku. And Beis, number two, V'nimshach Mohim Machlokes, and then they were drawn in them with them Machlokes. If that was Rashi's intention, two things, so Rashi should have said it the opposite order. If that was the intent, he should have said it in the opposite order. First, that they were drawn into the machlokes, Dosan Vaviram in the community there, Well, lekach loku, and that's why they were smitten, not they were loku and nimshchu. But what Rashi is saying, Elahaina hach, loku, they were punished. Shaloku bekach nimshchu imam machlokes. This was the oil shchenoi. This was the problem that they were punished. What? That they were drawn to the machlokes. That was their impact of the bad neighbors, that the neighbors influenced them to be bad, that they became bad through that. So Rashi holds that the people, the neighbors, were influenced by Koirach. Dasan v'Aviram and the Bnei Lev and the Bnei Ruvain were all influenced by Koirach. The impact, they changed them. And the Rebbe said, there's another subtle change from Rashi's language in Tanchuma. Basically, according to the Tanchuma, these people didn't become the neighbor, don't become bad. They remained, they were punished. According to Rashi, they actually changed, they made them bad. So there's another subtle one word. By Tanchuma, it says, Tanchuma haloshen avdu imoy b'machlikusoi, his quarrel. They were lost with Korach's quarrel, which means they themselves didn't change. According to the Tanchuma, it didn't impact them. It would still remain Korach's quarrel. But Rashi Meshana, because Rashi changes and writes, in there, in the plural, they were drawn into their machlokes. Moshe Rabbi. I said it's part. They became part of the machlokes. The Yeshloimar. So we can say Shabbat Tanchuma had Goshe. In the Tanchuma, the emphasis Shashchenim rak nigru achari Korach. The neighbors were just dragged after Korach. Melochem madgish zuhi rak machle kusay. And that's why he emphasizes this is his argument. Shal Korach. Shemaise hora, who's the act? Who is considered it bad? It only relates to Russia is bad. It's his machlokes, but not the neighbor. The neighbor is not part of it because he never really impacts the neighbor, according to the Tanchuma. That because of the neighboring of Koirach impact them, they were dragged into machlokes. That hints that the neighbors actually were drawn to the machlokes. So it's their machlokes now. It's not his machlokes. It's their machlokes. This becomes the neighbor's machlokes too. Machlokes shel Rabbim, public machlokes. Not only the bad neighbor, but the other neighbors as well. They become part of it because it's an influence. So the Rebbe argues and shows in Rashi that Rashi learns that the bad neighbor of the Russia causes the Russia to become bad. He's dragged along. We're according to the Tanchuma, he's not really dragged along. He remains the Russia, is just gets punished by chitzonis, or even if he does get bad, it's just externally, not the essence doesn't change. That's Rashi. But the Medrash Rabbi, the Medrash Rabbi now. The Medrash Rabbi is like the third way. Shashchenes hariz a siman. Being a neighbor, it's only a sign. It's not an impact. It's a sign. It's a signal. It shows us. Al mehusam shalashchenim. It tells us who the neighbors are. Shebimhusam shayochim zelazeh. That in essence they have a connection one to another. This is what the Bamidbar says specifically. Hoyu kulam balimach. They were. They didn't become. They were all Bala Machlokes Chulu. Afheim Hoyu Bala Meruva. They too were. So it's all Hoyu, war. Because this is not something that he created. They were Bala Machlokes. Unlike Rashi, Veloishe Nimshechu Imohem. Rashi, it says they were drawn Imohem B'Machlikusum. Were drawn. Over here, not they were drawn. That's what they were. Keep it Rashi. Mahainu, and that is Zuhi. This is their characteristic on their own. V'hashchein is the fact that their neighbors ragilsa. It only revealed v'yitzia, and this brought it out. Tchunazu, this characteristic minahelim elapoil, from the hidden to the in actuality. The fact that they moved into this neighborhood shows who they really are and who they were. But it's not affected by the Russia. They were Russia themselves. That's why they moved there. It shows who they are. But here it came out in the open. And similarly beforehand in the positive side, Omer Shom, also the Midrash Rabbi, when he talks the positive side, so he says there, Shashvotim, in the Midrash Rabbi says over there, when he discusses the positive side, he says, Shashvotim, the Degel Machne Yehuda, Shahoyu Smuchim L'Moshe V'Aaron, that the tribes of the flag of the camp of Yehuda, it says they were close to Moshe V'Aaron. It doesn't say they became. It says, Hoyu Kulam Gedelim B'Teiro. They didn't become. V'loi Rak. It doesn't say Shenasu Gedelim B'Teiro ki bet Chanchuma b'Pirush Rashi. In Tanchuma, the Pirush Rashi, it says, they became great in Torah through the impact. But according to the Medrash Rabbah, there was no impact of them. Even in the Tanchuma, there is somewhat of an impact. But in the Medrash Rabbah, who says that it's really who they are on their own, it says they were great in Torah from before, even before they were camped to Yehuda. It's not that Yehuda makes them into the next to Moshe Aaron. It's not like Moshe Aaron made them into great in Torah. They were great in Torah. But the neighborhood reveals that point. Shahashchina Gilsa, Shebe'etzem Hoyu Kulam Ruim Liz G'delim B'Torah. It revealed that in essence they were all fit to be great in Torah. It's revealed who they are in their essence. And the Rebbe gives another nuance. If you look closely into the language, you also see it's not the impact of the tzaddik to his neighbor to make him into a tzaddik, but the fact that he's already a tzaddik and it's just revealing. So look in the Yashloima, the Rebbe says we can say, this is what specifically the Medrash Rabbi says when he talks on the positive side. He says, Ashrei tzaddik v'ashrei shchenei. Fortunate is the tzaddik and fortunate is the neighbor. There's no lamed. It's not the tzaddik that he gets lishchena. Ashrei tzaddik v'ashrei shchenei. Lucky is the tzaddik and lucky is the neighbor. It doesn't say loy la tzaddik lishchena. Lucky is to the tzaddik and to the shochan, which means that the tzaddik somehow impacts. No, the tzaddik and the shochan. That's the way it's in Rashi. La tzaddik lishchene. Rashi, because according to the Tanchuma Rashi, it's the impact. The good fortune, Ashrei, the good fortune, and toiv, the toiv that comes to the neighbor, who that comes because of the tzaddik in his influence. That's why it's to the tzaddik who does it. As opposed to Midbar Ashrei, who Ashneim b'Shava. Ashrei is on both of them equal. Because they're both ruim, they're both tzaddikim. They're just the neighborhood reveals and brings that out. Also the exact language that the Bamidbar says, Va'aleihem nemar, and on them it said. Not on the tzaddik it says, Toiv l'rosh, Ashri tzaddik v'ashri shchene. Aleim on both of them. Ashri tzaddik v'ashri shchene. Fortunate is the tzaddik, fortunate is the shchene, because they're both fortunate, because the shochan is himself on that level. So the Tanchuma learns that the neighbor isn't impacting at all. It's the person that has it on his own. It's just revealing it, and that's why they're in the neighborhood. And the Rebbe says this explanation that the Midrash is trying to talk about, that it's only a sign that they get together, they're leaving the same neighborhood, shows that they're the same, that fits that whole discussion in the Bamidbar, which is talking about where they settled that the side of the south means no good, the side of the east is good. As in the Bamidbar, it's all about only you're placed in good places. That's what it is. It's all about. It fits in with that whole idea over there in that discussion in the Midbar Abba. The Rebbe said we can add. This explanation in the Vil Midbar Abba, his siman, that neighbor is merely, it's a sign on the connection and the tie that they have in essence, masim in klolus teichen drosh midbar that fits with the general contents of the expounded of the Midrabah here. Shemaschil ba'azgula shal mekoymes. He discusses over there the special omen, the special good fortune in these places. Dalud haruches mizrach ma'iriv tzofim v'dorim, about the four directions: east, west, north, south. There went sheshom chonad golim, where the camps, where they rested, where they camped. Kilashoinei, as the Medrash said, Mizrach, the Mizrach Mishama Eiri Yitzel La'olam. From the east, that where the light comes for the whole world, the sun comes from the east. V'sham Hoyu Choinim Degel Yehuda. There, the flag of Yehuda was camping. Shoyu Balei Melucha. They were king. The kings come from Yehuda, Mal Yehuda. David and the Mashiach, they're all from Yehuda, the kingdom. Balei Torah, Balei mitzvos, we saw Yisachar and Zvulun. Yisachar is more than Torah, is a Torah, Yisachar is Zvulun, Be'elecha. So they're Torah mitzvos, Lekach, Hoyu, Choinim, Shom, Moshe, Va'arin, Ubonov. That's why. Who's kept there? Moshe, Aaron, and his son. So Hoyu Balei Torah, they were masters of Torah, and Balei mitzvos, and masters of mitzvah. And they would atone for the Yidden with their prayers and the korbanos. And this is what he continues. Nemar Asher Tzadik. Ashrei, there's a Yud missing. Ashrei Shchene. Fortunate is the tzaddik, the neighbor, which are the tribes that were close to Moshe Aaron, that they were all great in Torah, which basically means that in their advantage that they had, in essence, who they are, Shadel Yehuda, and they had a connection to Mizrach, as was just said that they were in Mizrach because of all the advantage of Mizrach. That's why the flag of Yehuda camped in the special side of Mizrach. And therefore, that's why and his sons were there, because this is all the right camp, so it all fits in together with the idea that this is not an impact from one or the other, Moshe and them, but to tell you they themselves deserve there because they were all these great masters, which has association with Mizrach, and that's why they were next to Moshe, and that's why Moshe was there, but not that they were impacted with that. And that's why it's not also Ashrei Lit Tzadik, but Tzadik Ashrei Shcheinai, because this is not an impact from the Tzadik. And this is all in the Medrabah, that this is all a sign, that neighboring is a sign of who they are in their essence. Oizvav. So since we have explained that according to Rashi, it's all about what's the impact. So the Rebbe now explains That's why Rashi only says the sons of Reuven. It wasn't just a general neighbor for everybody. Those that we found that were impacted, those who are the ones that were affected, we don't have evidence that more just to Bnei Reuven. The neighborhood is a bad neighborhood according to the Tanchuma, that there is a collateral for the people in the neighborhood damage, they get punished, or according to the Medrash Rabbi, that these people move in that neighborhood for their own reason. That's can be all of that tribes. But if the issue is that influence, we only know influence about these cases, the cases of what Torah mentions. Based on this explanation, Rashi's view, move on Hatam, we understand the reason Rashi Kosev Rak. Rashi only writes Degel Ruven, the flag of Reuven. V'lohevi gav Shimon v'God. It doesn't bring down Shimon and God. Kivon shelishitas Rashi. Since according to Rashi's view, hoi l'rosha v'oin l'shchenoi, uhu mitzad hashpos harosha al anhogas hashochan emuhusei. The reason why it's oil l'shchenoi is because the influence of the Rasha on the conduct of his neighbor and changing them around. Move on she'ena davar hashala b'koil. So it's understood this is not equal by everybody. And therefore, in our case, we only have what whoever the Torah tells us that they went along. The tribe of Reuven, those who were dragged into the machlokes. The kivon shehem hoyu iker hadegel, since they were the main of the degel. B'meila muvan shehem hoyu smuchim. So it's understood that they were closer and they had more connection to Bnei Kos, whereas Korach, they were closer to Korach. As opposed to Shimon and God, which is not specially in the posik. We don't have to say this. We're not forced to say that also they were impacted and were influenced by that neighboring, that they should be dragged with them. Only Reuven. Even within Reuven, Rashi says specifically, Lokumem doson v'aviram u'mosayim v'chamishim ish. It was doson v'aviram, the 250 men. They specifically, Hainu, shelo yishpia koyrach al kol hashevet. Koyrach did not influence the entire tribe. Ela mispar muad b'shevet Reuven gufa, but on a small number in Shevet Reuven itself. He doesn't mention the whole tribes. And even in Reuven specifically, that's what Rashi says, the 250 and Dosan Avira. And the Rebbe says now also why the Rashi singles out Dosan Vaviram to show that Rashi therefore specifically spells out Dosan Aviram, the 250 men. The loy kosav stam doesn't write just lekach lokum hem im koirach vadosi. That's why they were punished with koirach and adosi. He spells it out. Dosan Aviram and 250. Sheyesh loymar. We can say shebazesh et sid of Dosan Aviram lamasayim v'chamishim ish. Why did he bring them together to show you what happened to the Masayim v'chamishim ish? Dosan Aviram we know were Baal Machlokes, but this caused to Dosan Aviram. They were corrupt. We know that. To bring them together. Kavanos lahadgish. Rashi's intention is to emphasize what is the idea, the contents, and what is the idea of a neighboring of a Rosha? It impacts and it influences the essence of the people that are neighbors to him. because they became like Dosan Aviram. The Kshev Sheposhu Shebedosan Vaviram. Just like it's obvious, Dosan Aviram. Lo Irak Nigreru Achrei Machlekus Shel Koirach. It wasn't just that they were dragged. Rashi uses the Lashon that they participated. Shenimshechu, not just Nigrar. They were naturally Bala Machlekes. As we find in the Chumash, that was done to the 250 people, to being neighbors of Rosh, they became Bala Machlekes. That's why Rashi wants to clearly say, first of all, the Rebbe points out over here that it wasn't everybody. We only know about the Ruvain. Since the Bnei Ruvain, Rashi makes the point saying, Dosan Aviram is 250, because that's all we know. We're influenced. The reason Rashi says Dosan Aviram Asayim Chamishim is to point out that they were influenced by them. And they became just like Dosan Aviram, which is obviously that they were Mal Machlekes. And they were not just, went along, but they actually had an impact on them. In Oizayin, the Rebbe is going to challenge his interpretation that according to the Tanchuma, a neighbor doesn't impact, it's just a superficial and external matter, that when the Tanchuma talks about the positive side, he actually says that they impact him, that Yehuda was impacted by Moshe Aaron. They became and they impacted. And the Rebbe wants to explain that there may be a difference between a tzaddik actually has an impact where by the Rashi it's only superficial, and also the Rebbe brings down the Rashi. Let's look inside. Zayin. But the Rebbe says it seemed that's what we explained earlier. This that we said before, that the impact of neighborhood is only external. It's only as far as punishment. We need to really look into this. Because it's very clear in Tanchuma. When it talks about the flag of the camp of Yehuda was next to the place, the camp of Moshe and Aaron. And he brings down, quote, Mekan Omru. From here the rabbi says, Ashrei le'tzadik va'ashrei l'shchenei. Fortunate is the tzaddik and fortunate is the neighbor. And he says, Eilu shloishes hashvotim shoyu smuchim l'Moshe v'Aaron. These three tribes that were next to Aaron, nasu, they became, meaning not that they were. Before the Rebbe quoted that they were, but here in the Tanchuma it says they became gedolim b'Torah. And he brings the psukim, Yehuda shenemar le'yosur, and le'yosur shevet mi Yehuda, be leaders, judges, be Yisachar K'sibu B'nei Yisachar Yodei Bina, of the Yisachar they will know understanding. Zvulun Moishchim B'Shevet Sefer, and from Zvulun it says they will pull the Shevet Sefer. They'll be all learned people. So we see that they became learned people because of that. And Rashi and again Tanchuma. Al Shahoyu Shchein of Kulam Nasu B'nei Torah, because they were neighbors, they became B'nei Torah. So here we see Harei Shashchenis Paula Bam Gufa. So you see that this being neighbor impacted themselves. Shenasu Gedolim B'Torah B'nei Torah. They became great in Torah. They became Torah. Here, the whole time we were trying to say that according to the Tanchuma, it's only a superficial, a chitzonizik connection. But you see, in the positive side, the Tanchuma says that that's how come they became all great, all the three tribes. Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun, all these different psukim, that they became great. So the Rebbe says, maybe there is a chiluk, yeshloimar, we can say, shaladasa tanchuma yesh chiluk ben shochan tov l'shochan ra. It makes a difference if it's a good neighbor can impact you, change you too, but a bad neighbor is only superficial. The shcheines l'ra pulos rak yitzenis. A neighbor to cause you bad, it's only impacts externally. The punishment you can get, or at most, the neighbor can be dragged if he doesn't change. He'll follow along, but it's not an essence change. That's by a bad, as we learned till now. But when we talk about a good neighbor, usually the measure of good is more than the measure of bad. So by the bad, he can only drag along. But by the good, over here, it can actually impact on the essence of the shachan. Is changed for the good. And that's why the Tanchuma writes, these three tribes that were next to Moshe and Aaron, they became Gedolim b'Torah, because that was the impact from being close to Moshe. So the Rebbe is answering, he says, even though in the Lashon of Tanchuma with regards to Rav, there says Nigrorim, and it was only a Chitzonis dike impact, but the Toiv, it's a change in the Mahus, and that's why they became Gedolim b'Torah. Now the Rebbe wants to say also Rashi. But the Rashi says that also bad and good, they both influence. But the Rebbe says now that a Shochan Toiv influences more than a Shochan Ra. V'ule yesh loymar, shegam l'shitas Rashi, yesh ma'ile b'shchenes l'toiv l'gav b'shchenes l'ra. There is a advantage in the neighbor, which is for the good, than a neighbor for the bad. The bad does more for the neighbor than a bad neighbor does for his neighbor. The merubah midatov, as we said before, because the measure of good is greater than the measure of bad. Shalochein. Hashchein is the degel machne Yehuda l'Moshe v'Aaron. That's why the neighboring of the degel machne Yehuda to Moshe v'Aaron brought about polo loirak al shevet Yehuda Resha machne, that it impacted not just the tribe of Yehuda, which was the head of that camp of the three over there, like by the Midaro, like by Shochan Ra, we said it only impacted the Ruvain and the Dos Mavir and Tumasayim Chamishim. But here, it didn't just impact Yehuda, who was next to Rosh Machne, Hasamuchloi, which was next to him, Al Derech Pu'ulas B'nei Kahos, Al Dega Ruven Levat Kinal, similar to the impact of the B'nei Kahos on the Degel of Ruven, which was only for Ruven, as we said before. Elogam Al Yisachar Uzvulon Hachonim Al Degel Machne Yehuda. But the good impacted also Yisachar Uzvulon, who camped together with the flag of Machne Yehuda because of the greater impact. Greater impact for the good, even more than the impact for the bad. And that's why we here included all the three tribes, not only the one that was sitting next to, like the Reuven, who was the head of the tribe. As we said before, by the negative, that only the tribe of Reuven, who was mamash next to Korach, Bnei Korach, is the one that was affected. And the Rebbe adds, this is also emphasized in the psukim that Rashi changes from the Medrash Tanchuma. Yesh lahoisif she'inyan zamutgash b'hashinu bepirush Rashi, that this is emphasized in the change in Rashi b'haraya b'negeya Yehuda, in the proof that he brings to Yehuda, that shenasu gedolim b'torim. He wants to bring the proof that they became great in Torah in the Rashi. So it may be posik ma'aksuvim. He brings the posik that's in the writing in the ksuvim. Shenemar, it says Yehuda mechaykiki. The Rebbe wants to understand, why does Rashi bring this posik Yehuda, which is in the ksuvim, which is later on? Why doesn't he bring the previous posik that's brought down in Tanchuma? There's a reason. The Rebbe says like this: Shemevi posuk maksuvim. He brings a posuk from the writing Shenemar. Yehuda mechaykiki. They were the engravers, the teaching of Torah. The loiki b'Tanchuma, he doesn't follow. The Tanchuma brings the proof Shemevi. The proof in the Tanchuma he brings says Lo Yosur Shevet Yehuda mechaykik b'mein Raglov, that there will never cease to be a ruler from Yehuda and a mechaykik, or statutes, the laws, the mechokiki, meaning his children will always be the one that are inscribing the Torah come from Yehuda. So why does Rashi bring the pasuk from Ksubim? This is Hanemar Ala b'Chumash. This was written in the Chumash. Better bring Chumash than Ksubim. Obeys the Fnei Parsha Seinu before our Parsha. So why doesn't Rashi bring down? That would seem Rashi bring down, and he changed from Tanchuma. Ki Neisef. So the Rebbe says, besides the fact, there's another reason the Rebbe says. Simply the reason is because over there it's a bracha, and over there it actually happened. Rashi brings a pasuk in which it's articulated. This is actually what happened. Yehuda mechaykiki, they were mechaykiki, not lo yosur, a problem. Lo yakosu b'chumash sheboy rakach tocha, not the pasuk in chumash. It's only a promise. V'abracha shelo yosur, it won't. Hooray. But the Rebbe said there's another emphasis over here. Pasuk b'chumash like mefurish is a b'chol shevet Yehuda. It doesn't. It's not specifically in all the tribe. It says from the tribe of Yehuda they will not. Some of them will be the lo yosur shevet me Yehuda u'mechaykim ben raglov. It means we won't cease. A rule of Yehuda and mechaykim ben raglov means only pirushay sheyiyu bahem Rashi Gol Yisrael. That amongst them, as Rashi says, there will be the head of the exiles. There will be the learned peace. Unisi Eretz Yisrael, the prince of Eretz Yisrael. So some of them will be. So Rashi doesn't want to bring. Yehuda mechaykiki. Yehuda is mechayki haris shmoy shel hashevet kulei. That's what we named the entire tribe is called Yehuda mechaykiki. Move on. So from this you understand. This is the characteristic of the entire tribe of Yehuda. That's why Rashi brings it down to tell you what the characteristic of the tribe of Yehuda. Belochein shina Rashi because of zeh. That's why Rashi changes and brings this pasuk lahadgish to emphasize sheshchenus pe'elas umeshane mehusu shalash, that the neighboring changes and impacts who the shachan is. They became a Yehuda mechayki, not just a few people there, lo yosur. That's why Rashi brings it down to bring this point. That's the emphasis in bringing and changing it from the pasuk. In addition, that this is the practical because this happened over there. Rashi also wants to emphasize the change that it impacts. And the Rebbe adds further, Rashi also says, Toiv latzadik, toiv l'shchena, good, not fortunate. Rashi changes. Tanchuma says fortunate. Fortunate is the tzaddik, fortunate is shachar. Rashi says good for the tzaddik, good for the neighbor. Kiloshen ashrei, because the language of fortunate, meloshen oisher, or meloshen shevach, from fortunate or praised, yitochen gam kasher mekabel hashpo schar al yidei hatzadik. That fits even when you got it, the reward through the tzaddik, you're still fortunate. Oisher nishpa man hogas hatzadik. That you were influenced from but you didn't change really. Mashenkin haloshen toiv. When we say good, you're good. That includes the meaning that you actually changed. Your whole definition changed. You become good. The Lashon Tov, Rashi still wants to emphasize that it's all about changing. And this is the Rashi's style, Chidush, over the Tanchuma, which is just impacting. Rashi is talking about change. The Rebbe says that this is a change in all of the Degel Machne Yehuda. It's a change in the Pasuk Rashi Mechoykiki, the whole tribe changed. It's a toiv, they become good. And the impact was not just on Yehuda, it was on everybody. So according to Rashi too, there's a difference between the toiv and the good neighbor and the bad neighbor. The bad neighbor can only impact chitzonis. Even in Rashi, they're all impacted, but it's much greater the impact in the tzad toiv because of midah toiva is greater. The good measure is much greater than the measure of punishment. In Ois Ches, the Rebbe adds al derech haremes v'hadrush a way of a hint and expounding the idea, we're not just talking about the neighborings, we're talking about the connection of this tzaddik v'toiv is to guarantee not to be with the Russia and l'shchene, to go ahead and make sure not to be involved with the oil Russia l'shchene by being toiv l'tzaddik toiv l'shchene. Let's look inside. Ches v'yesh lo'isibas al derech haremes v'adrush hashaychus de bezin yonim elu. The connection between these two. We're talking about two separate inyanim, right? We're talking about the toiv l'tzaddik, toiv l'shchene. One inyan is good for the tzaddik, good for the neighbor. That's one. And then v'oil l'rasha, v'oil l'shchene. And woe to the evil and his neighbor. So what is the connection? Because they're both talking about neighbors. This is a neighbor, this is a neighbor for the good, neighbor for the bad. But the Rebbe says no. It's not because they define it because they're both the same subject of neighboring. But also the content and what we're talking about, the neighborings over here. We're talking about what happened with the Rasha and the Shchenei, and you have to be Tov Latzadik, Tov Lashchenei to get away from the Rasha and Shchenei. What is the pathway to be saved and to get rid from being drawn into machlokes, which is oil Rasha? That's the Rasha. Hu alidei esek batoyram is through the occupation in Torah, to being the Tov Latzadik, Tov Latzadik. V'chein liidoch. Same thing is on the other hand. That's why they're also the neighborhood, the Shcher, the Shachan, and the Torah, to teach us from one or the other. Today, in order to learn Torah properly, it should be Tov Latzadik, Va'acha Iskim Yiyu Gedolim B'Torah, and those occupants should be great in Torah. That was the Shchenim, that they became great in Torah. V'hainu, what does it mean to be great in Torah? She is Achdim HaTorah, to unite with the Torah. Udavke Kasha Misrachkim. It's only specifically when you distance yourself from machlokes to the other extreme. So this is the connection between Tov, Torah, and the Ra machlokes. To get rid of the Ra, you got to be to the Tov. And for the Tov to be proper Tov, to be Gdolim b'Torah, to be one with the Torah, you got to stay away from machlokes. And the Rebbe adds now, this is also Yesh Loimar Shezeu Gam Ki Mitayme HaShayches, the Parshas Bamidbar L'Chag HaShavuz. This is also the reasons of the connection of the portion of Bamidbar to Shavuos. We always read Bamidbar before Shavuos. The Lo'ilam Koidim Parshas Bamidbar Sinai Koidim Atzeret. So what's the connection in this Parsha before Sinai? Because just as in this parsha are explained these two ideas of staying away from machlokes and getting to the highest level of Torah, al derech zehu be'inyan the Matan Torah. The same thing is by Matan Torah. Matan Torah brought about peace and brought about the highest level of Torah, and that's why the idea of Tov L'Rasha and the Tov L'Tzadik, Oil Rasha and Tov L'Tzadik are in this parasha, because this is the message over here, what Torah brings. It's explained in the sages of blessed memory as it pertains to Matan Torah. Torah was given to make peace in the world. Not machlokes, peace. Which really means to say make peace means to make peace in unity in a place where there could be disagreement. And you need the Torah to pull you into not to make machlokes. And on the other hand, Torah gives you, helps you make the peace. But how do we get the Torah? Because we have peace. Why? What's the reason? Why did we get the Torah? They encamped in a singular way. This was under Shchedesh Sivan. The Amr Razal, our sage of blessed memory, say the Kan Hishvu Leiv Ech. The Kan Hishvu. Here they were all one heart. Vayichan, singular. So they got it because of that peace and Achdus. Vayideze Nase Yisroim Ruim LeKabolos HaTorah. The Bein become fit to receive the Torah. So Torah, peace. Torah brings peace, and the Achdus brings the Torah. By them, Konfurish B'Chazal, and this is explained, articulated very clearly in our sage blessed memory. This man Shabo L'Sinai, when they came to Sinai, Chonu Chani Achas, Vayichan, they rest one camping. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter says, Hoyil V'Shonu Yisrael Samachlikis. Since they hated the discord, no more discord. V'Ahavu Sasholim, and they loved peace. V'Nasach Chani Achas, became one camp. This is the time I'm giving them the Torah. It's the peace among them that brought them the Torah. Torah brings peace, and the peace brings them the Torah. Shneim biyachat, both together. Bitla machlokes, the negation of discord. V'hagadlus b'Torah, and the greatness in Torah. Not to have machlokes and greater boyim al yidei shchenes l'tzadik. This is by being close to the tzaddik that we make sure no machlokes and really great in Torah. Tov l'tzadik, tov l'shchene. Good for the tzaddik l'shachon. Ke'esek ha'Torah shel tzaddik u'boifron shel shalom v'achdus. The occupation of Torah v'tzaddik, he learns Torah in a peaceful and in a way of unity. B'frat limud ha'Torah l'shmo, especially when you learn the Torah for the sake of Torah. Torah, the Torah as it's tied and connected with the giver of Torah. And therefore, through being in the proximity and neighborhood of the tzaddik, being next to the tzaddik and learning his Torah of the tzaddik, this impacts the peace and unity by each one. It's Tov Tzaddik and Tov L'Shcheinei. Then we become the neighbor learning the Torah. To the extent we merit the true peace, it's going to be with the coming of Mashiach. He will teach Torah the entire nation. In the way of unity. As the Rebbe quotes from the Rambam, at that time, there will be no jealousies, no problems, no competition, no jealousy, no competition. There's also not going to be competition and jealousy of kedusha even. Why? The world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem, as water covers the ocean. This is Sichos, Shabbos Parshas Bamidbar, Tavshin Lamed Hey, Tavshin Mem Gimel, Tavshin Dalad Mem, and Vav Tishrei, Tavshin Chav Ches.